Chapter 4, Part 2 of The Seven Stairs by Stuart Brent. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 4, Building the Seven Stairs, Part 2. Nelson Algren and Jack Conroy could perform a remarkable duet on the subject of James T. Farrell, Conroy in a broad Irish accent, Algren in a clipped, half-muttering manner. I never learned the personal source of their animosity, but the name of Farrell had the magic to channel all their hostilities and frustrations into a fountain of pure malice. It was wonderful. Sometimes Nelson brought his mother. Sometimes he would bring with him one of the girls related to the novel he was then writing, The Man with the Golden Arm. One night Nelson took me to the wild side. We entered a Clark Street tavern, a long bare hall, perhaps 150 feet long and 30 feet wide. Along one wall stretched a huge bar. It was a busy evening. Every stool was occupied. We crossed the wooden floor to the other side of the room, where there were rows of small tables with folding chairs set around them. Before we were seated, one of the men at the bar slugged his woman in the mouth, and the two fell off their stools, blood gushing, and landed, one on top of the other, on the floor. The bartenders came around and dragged them out, pitching them into the street. A moment later, one of the bartenders was at our table asking for our order. He knew Nelson, and they chatted easily. I was, frankly, sniffing, for as the stale beer smell of the place settled, I had a sense of being literally in a zoo. As I looked about, I observed a mesh of wire fencing across the section of the ceiling beneath which we were sitting. I got up and inspected. There above us were live monkeys sitting on a bar behind the fence. I sat down and asked Nelson what this meant. He said, "Wait and see." The tavern din was terrible, a demonic blend of shouting, laughing, swearing, name-calling, the human cries at inhuman pitch. It was out of a Gorky novel. We drank several beers and waited, talking very little. Nelson's face seemed fixed in a slight smile of playful disdain. It was impossible to say of what. My bafflement was intensified when two men walked in and approached the place where we were sitting. They pulled a ladder from the wall, climbed the steps, and opened the door of one of the cages. One of the men took a monkey by the leather strap attached to its collar, placed it on his back, and climbed down the ladder. He walked to the far end of the room, opened a door, went in, and closed the door after him and his companion. I sat, rooted to my seat, failing to understand what I had seen. Was this in some way the meaning behind the phrase, "a monkey on his back"? I knew that whatever was going on here could scarcely be an idle zoological experiment, yet somehow I felt an impenetrable wall between my innocence and the full possibilities of human depravity. I looked once more at the people in the tavern, and all at once it was with different eyes. I no longer saw them as dregs and strays. I saw something terrible, humiliating, too outrageous to form into words. What is happening? Who are these people? Are they indeed people? But am I? Have I an identity? My smugness melted, and the distaste I had felt for what I saw now angered me. I had come into this place, small, mean, and superior, a cad and a fop, the epitome of what I had long viewed with scorn in others. I had a better notion of what Nelson was seeing and the nature of his protest. He had shown me a world where people lived without choice or destination. I lived for days with this nightmare, asking myself why I should feel guilt for those who no longer feel responsible for themselves. Then it occurred to me that the question was never one of guilt, but only of love. The agony exists regardless of the setting. The lack of love is not alone on Clark Street. To be successful, an autographing cocktail party must be planned with consummate skill and attention to detail. You must leave nothing to chance. You may not pretend that everything will work out satisfactorily at the last minute. It will not. And because I respected writers so much, I tried to guard them against the ultimate humiliation of sitting at a table before a pile of their own books with no buyers. I adopted the following procedure. First, get from the author his own list of names, people he would like personally to invite to his party. Phone each of them, or at least write a postcard asking if they are interested in receiving a signed copy of the book. Next, send out the invitation to all your charge accounts. Then, check the mailing list for people you think will be interested in the book. Avoid freeloaders. Invite the press and the literary critics, and try to write a short human interest story for the columnists. In short, build up as big an advance as possible. Furthermore, don't throw a skimpy party. People carry away impressions, and the only impression you can afford is a bountiful one. It is said that all the world loves a lover, but one thing you can be sure of is that they love a winner. So avoid failure by planning against it, and then pray. Pray that it won't rain or turn freezing cold, that the pipes won't break or the electricity be turned off. Pray that you may fulfill your multiple responsibilities to the author, the publisher, and your own hopes for a continuing operation. It seemed natural that one of our greatest cocktail parties should be given for Nelson Algren upon publication of The Man with the Golden Arm. Yet, behind the scenes, things went very oddly, and for a time it was hard to tell whether either the author or the publisher wanted the party, or the large downtown department store, either which entered the picture as a prospect for the event. Anyway, it took place at the Seven Stairs. Ken McCormick, editor-in-chief of Doubleday, Nelson's publisher, flew into Chicago. I can still see him, loaded with books in both arms, carrying them from one room to another. There was high excitement, newspaper photographers, and an unbelievable crush of people. It all began to tell on Nelson's nerves and mine. It seemed to me he was writing too long in each book, and at times he would change his mind in the middle of an inscription and ask for another copy. To Nelson, such revision was a literary exercise. To me, a spoiled copy was a financial loss. The line of guests seemed endless, and I began to develop an active dislike for people, for money, for the whole business. Besides, it was getting awfully hot. Nelson and Ken and I removed our coats. Nelson even gave up writing long paragraphs in each book. I tried keeping a cool drink at his side at all times. It seemed to help. It was a great but strange party. Nelson was a success, and in a way I was too. And this altered things enormously. It had never occurred to me how people attach themselves to the rescue fantasy, how easily failure inspires love, how differently even the semblance of success affects relationships. All at once, people who had only wanted to help me became hypersensitive and found me snubbing them. And I was feeling a new sensitivity also. You can't destroy me in the process of buying from me. It was the beginning of a new struggle. The last guest finally left. Ken McCormack was a very happy publisher. I swept all interior confusions aside and counted up the books. We had sold 1,000 copies of The Man with the Golden Arm in a single night. It was almost too much for Ken. He had to see it to believe it. And we were all dead tired. Just as I was about to turn the last light switch before we went out the door, I remembered and asked Nelson to autograph a book for me. As he bent down to write, I could see Bob Corman and myself sitting on the sand dunes reading the galleys of the book. I remembered conversations with Nelson and Jack Conroy in regard to the title, and Jack's needling of Nelson when the advances were running out, saying, "Any day now you'll be begging to come to work on the encyclopedia," the constant drudgery to which Jack has given most of his working hours for 2 decades. Nelson, crouching over the book, wrote, "For Stuart and Jenny, the best in the West, as well as the South, North, and East, because he's the boy with the golden wife and she's the girl with the golden guy." For there was indeed now a Jenny, a golden girl with whose short life mine was now linked in a more responsible relationship than I had ever imagined I would assume, a decisive part in the unimaginable future building before me. We were all on our way now, but Jack Conroy was the last to leave. He had waited until the very end to say, "Papa, it was a fine party. I'm proud of you and your efforts for Nelson." They were all gone now, the columnists, the celebrities, the crowd that stretched in a file of twos almost to the corner drugstore. Only Jack Conroy, a huge and gentle man with his "Hello, Papa," the extended hand, and the tiny stare in the blue-gray flecked eyes, always waiting, wondering how you are going to accept his greeting. This is the wild, humorous, tender man who gave Tennessee Williams his first important break, who first published Richard Wright, who wrote a bestseller 30 years ago that is highly regarded by the few who remember it, and who is rated as the second most popular American author in all of Russia, one below Melville and one above Poe. His only material reward, a purported fortune in rubles which he has no intention of ever collecting. When Jack edited Midland Humor, a discerning anthology published in 1947, he was late to his own party at the 7 Stairs. When he arrived, I was shaken, as I always am, by his look of, "Will I be scolded? Will I be forgiven?" He can be the most jocular of men, and the most understanding. One afternoon, over coffee at the 7 Stairs, he reported at hilarious lengths on the drinking prowess of his friend Burl Ives, who was then doubling between a cabaret engagement at the Blackstone Hotel and the vaudeville show at the Chicago Theater. I was in the depth of my psychiatric period, and suggested that help might be in order. "He doesn't seem unhappy about it," said Jack innocently. Today Conroy, one of the most talented men in American letters, quietly stands and looks. When he talks, he stares directly at you, or turns his head entirely away and speaks to empty space. I think he is the most honest man I have ever met. In his intent, in his appraisal of others and their writing, and in his own bereavement. As the gait grows slower, the shyness becomes more pronounced, and the gaze extends away farther and farther. He has been called the Samuel Johnson of the Chicago South Side. The designation fits in many ways. The large physical build, the forceful expression and comprehensive knowledge, the long toil in the compilation of reference works, and in some ways not at all. He has been many things, at times even a wandering player, and his physiognomy suggests a somewhat more cerebral William Bendix. He can provide the most wonderful encouragement to others, but his own burden is lack of time for all his obligations, for all he should do. Publisher after publisher offers him handsome advances, and he declines them. He knows he would not fulfill the obligation. We were at lunch not long ago. "I'm going down to Mexico on my vacation," he said. "I'm going to visit Motley." I had known the tragic eyes of Willard Motley, whose knock on any door did not fill our friend Algren with any particular enthusiasm. "You know, that Nelson is mean," Jack said. "He wrote some nasty things about me in the Reporter. Did you see that?" "No, I didn't." "Well, he did. We used to see a lot of each other." We walked back to the office building, where Jack does his faithful, painstaking hack work. "I'll drop you a line from Mexico," he said. "I'll tell Motley that you're writing a book. Take care of yourself. I'll see you when I get back." The gray-blue eyes were suddenly swollen with sadness, and the voice stretched in a heavier drawl. I wished with all my heart that things would work out well for Jack Conroy. The relationship between genius and disaster is too deep for me to comprehend. I do know that genius is never made, it is only discovered. There has to be a front-runner. The notion that genius will out, regardless of circumstances, is simply to ignore the nature of genius, which must center upon itself in order to function. I sometimes think that the energy expended in creating a really imaginative work drains the humanity out of the artist. If his personal life suffers as a consequence, his business acumen is even more incidental. The Man with the Golden Arm was Algren's great commercial success, and the harvest was reaped by others. The story is told, or at any rate that part which has any bearing on this discourse, in a classic letter from Nelson to Otto Preminger, producer of the movie which bore the title, if not the imprint, of the novel. Hotel Vermilion, 6162 West Hollywood Boulevard, Los Angeles, California, February 16, 1955. Mr. Otto Preminger, Columbia Studios, 1438 Gower Street, Los Angeles, California. Dear Mr. Preminger, I am advised by your office that arrangements are now under way to award me the sum of $203.78 spent by myself to proceed, upon your invitation, to the city of Los Angeles. I find this gesture most generous, but am compelled to inform you that this money was spent to no purpose to which you are member. Thank you all the same. I am further instructed that arrangements are also under way to compensate me at the rate of $35 per diem for listening to the expression of certain thoughts after a manner of speaking, by yourself. These occurred between January 27th and 31st inclusively. But since these were all, like the novel about which you wove them, the property of other persons living or dead, I cannot in conscience honor them by acceptance of such compensation. Again I am grateful. And again I am instructed that a check for the sum of $750, in addition to the above items, is due me from yourself. I assume this may well be an effort to repay me for some 12 pages of double-spaced typing I achieved in an effort to discover what in God's name you were talking about. Since these pages served only to confuse you further, no moneys are rightfully due me. Yet your thoughtfulness does not cease to move me. Should this concern for me derive from a simple and heartfelt gratitude for a diversion afforded you for a full week by an interesting person, as you so happily put it when the moment came for parting, I do not feel you are so much indebted. Although I did not find in you an interesting person, I did discover one of arrogance approaching the uncanny. Upon the basis of mutual amusement, therefore, I am the debtor. And since you are decidedly more uncanny than I am interesting, I must, at a rough estimate, owe you close to $40. And forward this sum, confident of your satisfaction in alms from any quarter, however small, and remain your obedient servant, Nelson Algren. He jests at scars who never felt a wound. End of chapter 4.
Please subscribe to update new videos. Please share and like if you enjoyed the video. Thanks so much.